ready for this? Oh.
Like it like that. Hey yo, listen.
Drop it low to the flow. Oh.
Like it like that.
Yeah. Oh. Are you ready for this?
Okay, so get this. We're diving into the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
DRC.
Yeah, DRC.
Yeah.
And it's a situation that's as urgent as it is complex.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got these reports from Al Jazeera, BBC News, and the Africa Center for Strategic Studies.
Great sources.
Yeah, they're really good sources. And let me tell you, things are not looking good.
Not good at all.
It's like, imagine like a potential regional war,
Oh, yeah.
a humanitarian crisis. That's already displaced 500,000 people since January.
That's right.
And the ripple effects this could have across the globe.
Globally.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah, this is huge.
It really is. You're right to be concerned. I think we're seeing a very real risk of this conflict spiraling into something that echoes the horrific Congo wars of the past.
Oh, man. Those were devastating.
Absolutely.
And at the heart of it, all right, let's just get right to it, is the M23 rebel group
Yeah.
who have just captured Goma,
Big news.
the capital of North Kivu province.
They're making a serious push south. And everyone's wondering if Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu, could be next.
Yeah, that's the big question right now.
What's striking is how quickly the M23 have been able to advance.
It is, I mean, the Congolese army seems to be struggling
Well,
to keep up, and
yeah.
there are even reports of soldiers surrendering to get this Rwandan forces.
Whoa, Rwandan forces.
Yeah.
Now that adds a whole other layer to this,
It's
doesn't
a
it?
whole other layer.
Before we get into that, can we zoom in on what's happening on the ground?
Yeah,
These reports paint a grim picture.
they do. It's absolutely... Hospitals are overwhelmed. People are fleeing their homes with only what they can carry, and the threat of violence is constant.
It's terrifying.
It is. The UN is describing it as a humanitarian catastrophe.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's not an exaggeration.
I can't even imagine
It's really bad.
the fear and uncertainty people must be facing.
Absolutely.
All right, let's unpack this M23 group.
Yeah.
They're not exactly new to the scene, are they?
No, they've been around for over a decade. Founded in 2012 by ex-soldiers who were involved in earlier conflicts in the region. We're talking the Congo Wars
Right.
that ravaged the area in the late 90s and early 2000s.
So they've got deep roots in this whole mess.
Deep roots.
But what are they actually fighting for?
Right.
These reports mention protecting the Banyamulenge, who are Congolese of Rwandan origin.
That's right. That was their initial claim. Protecting the Banyamulenge and fighting the FDLR, a group with ties to the Rwandan genocide. But here's where it gets interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, their actions suggest they might be aiming for something much bigger.
Like, what, are they trying to overthrow the government?
Well, some analysts think that could be in the cards.
Really?
They've started forming alliances with other political parties and armed groups.
Wow.
Not exactly the behavior of a group solely focused on protecting a specific community.
Okay, so potentially a power grab.
Potentially.
But what about Rwanda's involvement? The elephant in the room, right?
Exactly. And it's not just speculation. UN investigations have found pretty solid evidence that Rwanda is backing the M23.
Oh, wow.
Think Rwandan troops on Congolese soil, M23 fighters, using weapons way beyond their usual capabilities and the sheer speed of their advance. It all points to a level of support that's difficult to ignore.
But Rwanda's denying any involvement, right?
Yeah.
Saying it's all about border security.
That's their official stance. They claim their troops are only there to prevent spillover from the conflict and ensure their borders are secure.
So we've got two very different stories here.
We do.
And meanwhile, the international community is starting to take notice.
They are.
The UN, the EU, and the US are all calling for a ceasefire
Right.
and demanding the Rwandan troops withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
There's even talk of mediation efforts like the Luanda process and the Nairobi process.
Yeah.
Have you heard of these?
Yes. The Luanda process is led by Angola, and the Nairobi process is led by Kenya. Essentially, they're attempts to get everyone to the table and hammer out a peaceful solution. But honestly, with the M23 making such significant gains, it's hard to imagine either process gaining much traction right now.
Yeah, it feels like every time there's a glimmer of hope,
I know.
the situation on the ground just explodes again.
It's so volatile.
And we can't forget the economic factors at play here.
Oh, yeah.
Eastern DRC is incredibly rich in minerals.
It is.
Things like coltan, cobalt, tantalum, and lithium all essential for the tech we use every day.
Exactly. The stuff our world runs on.
Wait, are you saying our
Yes.
smartphones and laptops are somehow tied to this whole conflict?
It's a real possibility. There are serious allegations that Rwanda might be profiting from the illegal mining and trafficking of these minerals.
Wow. So it's not just about political power and old grudges,
Nope.
but also who controls these valuable resources.
It's all connected.
That definitely complicates things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And to really understand the depth of this conflict, we need to delve into the historical context, particularly the devastating Congo wars of the 1990s and early 2000s. We're talking about wars that drew in 7 African nations and left a legacy of trauma and instability that still haunts the region.
Okay, so the ghosts of the past are very much present
Very much so.
in this current conflict. And I'm guessing Rwanda and Uganda's history in the DRC, both as allies and rivals, plays a big part in all of this.
Absolutely. Understanding their shifting alliances and motivations is key to deciphering how this conflict might unfold.
This is already so much to process.
It is.
We're dealing with a complex web of internal conflict,
Yeah.
regional tensions,
Right.
international pressure, economic interests.
All of it.
It's overwhelming.
And we haven't even touched on Burundi's role yet. Their military presence in South Kivu adds another layer of uncertainty to an already volatile situation. There's a real fear that the fighting could spread to Bukavu, which has already seen clashes between Burundian rebel groups and the Burundian military. Yeah, it's like a powder keg, just
Yeah.
waiting for a spark. And to make matters worse, there are whispers that Rwanda's strategy might have shifted since their last major intervention in the DRC back in 2012.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, back then, when the M23 last took Goma, Rwanda faced intense international pressure and ultimately withdrew its support.
Right.
But this time around, they've cleverly positioned themselves as a key player in regional security.
I'm not following. What do you mean?
Rwanda has troops deployed in places like Mozambique fighting insurgents. They're presenting themselves as the go-to force for stability in the region.
Okay.
This makes it much harder for other countries, especially those in southern Africa, who rely on them for security, to criticize their actions in the DRC.
So they're using their role as a regional peacekeeper to shield themselves from scrutiny while potentially pursuing their own agenda in the DRC. That's pretty strategic, I guess.
Exactly. And it all ties back to those valuable minerals we were talking about. Remember, whoever controls those resources has a lot of power.
Right. And there are those allegations that Rwanda's profiting from all of this. It's starting to feel like a very cynical game they're playing, all while the Congolese people are caught in the crossfire.
It's a stark reminder that power, politics, and economic interests often trump human lives. The stories coming out of Goma are heartbreaking. Hospitals overflowing, people struggling to find food and clean water, and the constant fear of violence hanging over everything. It's a humanitarian disaster unfolding in real time.
And what about those international calls for peace?
Yeah.
Are the Luanda and Nairobi processes actually going to achieve anything?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's going to be an uphill battle. The M23's recent advances have shattered any trust that might have existed, and Rwanda's playing its cards very close to the vest.
So are we just doomed to watch as this escalates into a full-blown regional war?
Not necessarily. The Africa Center for Strategic Studies, one of the sources we're looking at, emphasizes that we need to revitalize these existing peace frameworks. The Luanda and Nairobi processes might be struggling, but they offer a starting point for dialogue.
But how do we get everyone on board? I mean, we've got Rwanda potentially pulling strings, the M23 gaining ground, and all these other armed groups with their own agendas roaming around. It feels like a tangled mess.
It is a complex situation, no doubt, but it all comes down to political will. The international community needs to step up and exert real pressure. That means targeted sanctions against those who are fueling the conflict and supporting humanitarian efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Congolese people.
Okay, so sanctions and aid. But what about addressing the underlying issues that led to this conflict in the first place? Is anyone even talking about that?
That's the million-dollar question. The Congo Wars left deep scars on the region, and until those wounds are addressed, the cycle of violence will likely continue.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. I'm starting to see why you said the situation is as complex as it is urgent.
And we haven't even touched on some of the more nuanced aspects of the conflict. For instance, the M23's transformation from a localized militia to a seemingly more sophisticated force with potentially broader ambitions is a fascinating development.
Yeah, that really stood out to me as well. It's like they've leveled up or something. What do you make of that?
Well, it raises a crucial question. What's their end game? Are they content with controlling territory and resources in eastern DRC, or are they after something more?
You mean like political power on a national scale?
Exactly. And that's a question that should be keeping everyone up at night, because the answer will have huge implications not just for the DRC, but for the entire region.
And then there's Rwanda's potential power play with its regional security role. It's like they're using it as a shield to deflect criticism and potentially advance their interests in the DRC.
It's a possibility we can't ignore, and it suggests that traditional conflict resolution methods might not be enough in this case. We're likely looking at a long and drawn-out process.
It's heavy stuff. So where do we go from here? What's the most important takeaway for our listener?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the conflict in the DRC is not just a regional issue. It has global implications. Remember those minerals we were talking about earlier?
The ones in our smartphones and electric cars?
Yes. Those minerals come from the DRC, and the ongoing conflict could disrupt the global supply chains for these critical resources.
Wow, so something happening halfway across the world could actually have a direct impact on our lives.
Exactly. And it makes you think, doesn't it? Are we as consumers of these technologies in some way contributing to the conflict by fueling the demand for these minerals?
That's a really unsettling thought. And it begs the question, what is our responsibility as members of the international community? Is it enough to simply offer humanitarian aid? Or should we be doing more to address the root causes of the conflict, even if it means confronting powerful actors like Rwanda?
Those are the difficult questions we need to be grappling with. The situation in the DRC demands our attention, not just because of the human suffering, but because it has the potential to destabilize an entire region and disrupt global supply chains.
It's a stark reminder that we're all interconnected in ways we might not even realize. What's your final thought for our listener? Something that will really make them think about the bigger picture here.
Well, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity of this conflict, but it's important to remember that knowledge is power. The more we understand about the historical context, the power dynamics and the economic interests at play, the better equipped we are to demand accountability from our leaders and push for meaningful solutions.
So it's not about feeling powerless or turning away from the problem.
No.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge so we can advocate for change.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't just about the DRC. It's about recognizing how interconnected we are in this globalized world. What happens in one corner of the world can and often does have ripple effects that reach us all.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel disconnected from conflicts happening far away, but you've really driven home the point that this is something we should all be paying attention to.
And it's not just about paying attention. It's about taking action. Even small actions like staying informed, sharing information with others, or supporting organizations working in the region can make a difference.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. We've gone from the immediate crisis on the ground to the historical roots of the conflict, the role of regional and international actors, and even the potential impact on global supply chains. It's a lot to take in, but I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of the situation now.
And that's the goal, isn't it? To equip ourselves with the knowledge and understanding we need to be informed citizens and engage with these complex global issues.
Absolutely. To our listener, we encourage you to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going. The situation in the DRC is evolving rapidly, and staying informed is crucial.
Remember, this isn't just a story playing out on the news. It's a human tragedy with real-world consequences. And what happens next is up to all of us.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the conflict in the DRC. We hope this has sparked your curiosity and empowered you to learn more and take action.
It's been a pleasure sharing this information with you. Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.
And remember, every voice counts. Until next time.
Are you ready for this? Oh,
Like it like that. Hey yo, listen.
drop it low to the flow. Oh,
Like it like that.
yeah. Oh, are you ready for this?